Welcome everyone to the US Open Source Solutions Partner Community Call for September 2016. My name is Nick Johnson and I'm one of the community leads here for US Partners. It's my privilege to welcome you today, and I'll be introducing our other speakers here in just a few minutes. But before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items if I may. Down in the lower left-hand corner of your browser, you're going to see a messages option. If you have any questions or feedback throughout today's presentation for our speakers or anything that you're seeing or hearing, just go ahead and submit a message there and we'll reply back to you with a private one-on-one chat. I also need to remind you that today's call is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation, so if you do not consent to being a part of a recorded call, you should disconnect now. The audio for today's call is streamed through your PC speakers, so if you have any issues with that, just go ahead and adjust your audio there. If your browser doesn't play the video, you should see a slide with some moving graphics on it now. If it's not playing, just go ahead and refresh your browser. That should reconnect the stream for you. If you're having any issues with that, we do recommend trying another browser. We found that sometimes switching can be a benefit to that. Before I introduce today's speakers, I want to kick off just a couple of updates for the broader community. If you're new to this whole being a Microsoft partner thing, or you're just trying to figure out how do I stay informed and what's everything that's going on in the Microsoft partner world, we've got a ton of resources available for you. And so when I post the link for download to the slides here in just a minute, you'll be able to have this slides. I strongly encourage you to review this because we've got quite a bit of resources available across the board, right? All the way from training and enablement to just the general partner network and business resources and support options. All of those are things that are available and invested into by Microsoft specifically for you as a partner. And so what I'd encourage you to do is download this when I post the link here in just a second, and you'll be able to get access to that. Now specifically, where have you come to today? So we have these US technical and business communities, and this is one of our technical communities. So the OSS community is really here for you. So we're going to be here to share information with you, help you stay connected to what's going on as it relates to OSS and Microsoft and everything. So you're here, but this isn't the only community. We actually have 7 others designed specifically for technical resources at our partners across the US and abroad. If you happen to be coming in from around the world, you're welcome here too. And you can see all the links to all those different communities, and every single one of them's got blogs that they're posting on a regular basis, community calls like this one that we're hosting on a monthly basis, a Yammer group where you can dialogue with the Microsoft experts and with your fellow partners on a day-to-day basis if you want, and then we've got resources to help you do training and enablement. This open source solutions community is a brand new one, so today if you're on the call, you are a charter member. Congratulations. Someday we'll figure out a way to say thank you when we meet you face to face at a conference or something like that, but thank you for investing some time to be with us today. And with that, I'm going to get out of the way and I'm going to turn the floor over to our community lead, Tim Walton. You're going to see Tim's name all over things over the next months ahead, and Tim's going to be leading the charge. He's very passionate, I happen to know, about the OSS community. So Tim, tell us about the community a little bit more, my friend.
Thanks, Nick. I really appreciate that introduction, and thanks everybody for giving some time to listen to our first open source community call. In this call, we're going to sort of do a level set on open source, what the opportunity is. We're going to focus on why you should be interested in open source, specifically what is the market opportunity. Open source represents probably the biggest opportunity that we have in the Azure cloud, from our perspective and from a partner perspective on consumption. So we're going to go over that. We're going to go over the reasonings. Microsoft is that go-to cloud for open source. Then we're going to go over where should you focus on for open source. So we're going to go over the high value 6 workloads that we think about on open source. This community, we do want your feedback, so we really appreciate your feedback on what those workloads should be, but we'll go over those. And then how you can actually build a practice that is successful and profitable. So we're going to go over partner programs, resources to help you build a business, and how you can and we can co-sell with you. And then we're going to finish on what is coming in the future, and we're going to have a good overview of SQL on Linux and with a demo. So with that, let's get started and just cover the OSS community. So this is a key piece, and this is what we're launching today. So think of it as three things. Obviously, we're going to be doing blogs of new technology that's becomes available on the Azure platform, whether that's in the cloud or actually even on-prem. We will be covering that technology through a series of blogs. We'll also be having these calls that you're on now to go over certain technologies and things that are of interest to the partners. Probably the most important piece of the community is your feedback through Yammer. Because open source is all about contribution, we need your feedback, you in the field, the partners developing these offerings and solutions. We need to know where you need us to focus on and what type of technical feedback you need from us. So that is the goal of the open source community. One of the other channels that we're going to have, and we'll launch this at a later date, is a GitHub repository for various solutions. So keep your eyes open. I'll probably post that to the Yammer feed, and you'll be able to see how we're going to be collaborating through GitHub. So very quickly, the goals of the US OSS community. We want to explore new open source partner offerings. We have many partners out there, and probably you on the call right now, that have offerings that we're actually currently not aware of. So we want to take those offerings, bring them into Microsoft, and make you successful. We'll build those practices with you so that they are compatible with our joint selling aims. Then we want to make sure through this community that you have successful outcomes, meaning that you're giving us feedback on what works, what doesn't work, so that we can take that to the product group and the platform groups. Finally, it's all about technical readiness. At the end of these slides that are now available, we have a whole slew of open source training that's going to be available on Azure and the Microsoft platform, and how you can ramp up your technical skills. So technical readiness is obviously a big focus of this OSS community. So in summary, really, this is about making open source a first-class citizen in the partner ecosystem. We want our partners to deliver solutions for open source on Azure. So the first thing that we want to impress upon you is, why should we focus on open source? I am Tim Walton. I'm a technical solution professional, and I work with partners building the practice. With me is Dan Sandlin from the Global Black Belt team, and he helps partners sell their offerings to our customers. So with that, I'm going to transition to Dan and just to explain why Azure and why open source as a business decision for partners.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I think Tim laid it out pretty well there, in that his team, the partner folks, are really focused on developing the partner practices and making sure that the partners are able to develop and build repeatable practices that really capture new workloads on our public cloud. My team is focused across the Americas, is really trying to unlock big co-selling opportunity. How can we combine our Microsoft field sellers with your open source capabilities and really drive consumption in our public cloud? We think about the public cloud, we're really at the very early days of public cloud. It feels like it's been around for quite a while, and that it's really kind of on a second or third iteration, but we believe that we're really early in this space, and we think that it's a unique opportunity for a partner-led motion. We think that the opportunity for partners is immense in being an early mover in this space and being able to really lock into picking a right channel partner and a cloud partner that can help you grow your business, but then also really addressing the enterprise marketplace with a unique offering from your partner offerings. So when we go through this, I think Tim's got a next slide here that really talks to kind of the areas that we're investing as a company. It's really four big areas we've got on the slide, which is the efforts that we have inside our company, our offerings, the partnerships that we put in place so that you can build a strong partner offering on top of our cloud platform, and then even the employees and culture that is changing in Microsoft. So Tim, you want to go through kind of our product efforts?
Yeah, as Dan said, it's basically these 4 pillars, if you will, of our investment. Our efforts on some of our first-party products that we're bringing to the open source platform, whether that's SQL Server on Linux, as we'll see later on today, or HD Insight as a managed service. It's really Linux and built on an open source stack. And also things like we've demoed before, which is Bash on Windows, right? It's our commitment to that open source. The other big piece of it is our partnership. So think of this as the partnership with the ISV ecosystem of open source. Think of this things like Jenkins, the Eclipse, Red Hat, our announcements on Red Hat being supported on Azure, etc. And also us working with the Linux Foundation to get that Linux on Azure certification that you as partners can go after. The other thing to remember is we've invested a lot of our capital on getting new employees. If you look at this list here, like Brendan Burns, for example, he came from Google. He was the founder of Kubernetes. He has now joined Microsoft. That has made the media understand that we are really serious about open source. Ross Gardler, who is the president for Apache Software Foundation, Wim Kokerts, who came from Oracle, is now considered Mr. Linux, and actually I think he did the keynote at LinuxCon, is now with Microsoft. So this is really making sure that, you know, our investments are on open source. And with that, as we go to the next slide, I just want to clearly articulate what our approach is with open source. First of all, we want to, let's just step back. Open source, or we should say the Microsoft platform, whether it is on-prem, a private cloud, public cloud, whatever that might be, our idea is that we're going to provide an agnostic platform of platforms. And to do that through open source, we need to enable Linux as a first-class citizen. So that means products like Linux, open source, Java, Docker, etc. must be enabled on our platform. Think of that on running on Azure. Then these open source partner ecosystems such as Docker, Docker Data Center, Hadoop, etc. must be integrated in our platform so that they work seamlessly. The next piece is releasing some of our first-party products to open source. For example, the .NET Core, PowerShell, our Power BI visuals, etc., TypeScript. That's very important for us to allow that to happen so we can gain attraction from the developer community and the open source development community. Finally, it's about participating. I don't know if many of you know this, but we actually participate on Docker technology through a high-level upstream open source contributions. We do it for Linux as well, OpenJDK. All of these we're contributing code to. But the big point I want you to remember is for us to go after this open source cloud, we can't do it without our open source partners. The thing I would point out is when it comes to open source, think of it this way. Traditionally, when we sell our products, we are the ones that own the information. We are the ones that have the information asymmetry is for us. We control that information. It is not the case with open source. You, as partners, will probably know just as much or more on open source technology than we are. That's why it's a very big opportunity for all of our partners. So Dan, do you want to talk about the opportunity?
Yep, so as Tim mentioned a couple slides ago when we talked about the partnerships, if you look at just the logos that are now certified and able to run as first-class citizens across the Microsoft public and private hybrid cloud models, you'll see that we've built a great foundation for partners to be able to monetize and be able to build practices around. If you look at this logo and set of logos to the left, on the first area where you see System Center, Team Foundation Services, Dynamics, those are the products that Microsoft used to monetize. Still does sell in the marketplace, but it used to be where we focus all of our energy. what's changed really over the last several years is that the aperture and the opportunity, the share of the market has expanded tremendously to include all of the areas that are listed here. What we've spent a lot of time on over the last, say, 6 months to 9 months is educating our Microsoft Field Channel on 6 main sales plays. And so the idea is that we would like to work with partners across these 6 areas: the enterprise cloud infrastructure, the dev test, open source data infrastructure, high performance computing, Java, LAMP, and mean. And we break that out in the next slide. But where I want to leave this conversation is that the opportunity now for partners is beyond just private cloud packaged software and includes leveraging all of the Microsoft existing partnerships and then working with our channel and our field sellers across these 6 core areas in which to co-sell together to customers. So in those 6 areas that we're discussing here, on infrastructure optimization, this is the process of re-platforming and moving your environment to the public cloud. We're actively working with a number of partners around building expertise for the migration to the public cloud. How do you monitor? How do you manage infrastructure as deployed in a hybrid or a public model? We leverage partnerships with Red Hat, Canonical, SUSE, and Core OS as examples here. If you have a practice that's focused on infrastructure modernization, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to work with you as you have skills in those areas and can work with us and our field sellers on how to help our customers move their infrastructure to Azure. The next area that we spend a lot of cycles on is development and test in the public cloud. So if you're building a new application, if our customers are building new applications, we often see a great partnership between ISV solutions and SIs on top of those ISV solutions in order to deliver value to our customer base. The partnerships with Docker and Mesosphere are great scenarios here in the dev test space, but also with Chef and with Puppet and Red Hat Ansible. These kind of approaches in the open source development space really help customers deploy and develop on our global footprint. The Java Enterprise application space is really of interest, and this is as companies look to really move traditional monolithic applications into the public cloud, re-platform those and redevelop those in cloud-centric models. They really need partners such as the ones on the call here that can help them think through how they change what they used to do 10 years ago to how they should rethink about applications, large-scale enterprise applications in the cloud. We have partnerships there with things like Red Hat OpenShift and Pivotal Cloud Foundry to help companies redevelop and build brand new applications geared to this cloud world. LAMP and mean applications are really about nimble applications and nimble companies looking to develop solutions that really capture new markets in the public cloud space. And the open source data infrastructure, our relationships with people like Cloudera and Hortonworks, not to mention DataStax, are great opportunities for SI partners looking to capitalize on the Internet of Things or massive amounts of data flowing into the public cloud, and then working with our Microsoft field sellers on positioning this to enterprise customers about how to make sense and make use of the data that's available to them to really capitalize on customer engagement. The high-performance computing space is an area we have a couple experts on my team that really dive into helping people do computer modeling, being able to do manufacturing optimization, and a variety of high compute requirements. So these are the 6 areas we are seeing our Microsoft field sellers really focus on conversations within select verticals as well as horizontals, and the areas that we're really actively trying to recruit partners such as yourselves to bring your expertise and combine it with our public cloud in order to address this market opportunity.
And just to add on to that, Dan, us working with net new partners or some current Microsoft partners on some of these workloads, what's interesting is these opportunities that they're bringing, we probably never saw before at Microsoft, right? Like if we look at something like a Pivotal Cloud Foundry based on Java, Spring, etc., we probably would never see that. That is why it is absolutely critical that we're having these partners that are a trusted advisor in these fields, and we bring them in with our sales team. So look at these high-value workloads, and we definitely need those SIs to be able to deliver value there. I would definitely agree with Dan. It's this DevOps, which is fueling a lot of opportunity for partners. It's this Java Enterprise platforms. And then, specifically, as Dan said, the data platform, I would actually argue, you could argue this, Dan, right, which is to go after big data, you're going to have to implement some kind of open source solution. And currently, that's why we need SIs to help us with that. So how do we go about delivering this? So we have several teams that are available for you to help you build your practice and get started with open source. So if you think about it from the top point and the OSS lead, these guys are the ones that define the strategy of what we're going to be doing on open source. So when you think of that OSS lead at the top left, they're the ones that define the strategy and what that messaging is going to be. We then have various technical roles that can help you build your practices. So I am actually in the partner development unit. We love three-letter acronyms at Microsoft. But the open source software partner development unit, we're there to help you build that practice, right? So find out what your open source offering and then make it a true offering within Microsoft that our sellers can then go and market from a technical perspective. Then from the global black belt team, we have certain technical solution professionals that can deliver very deep technical expertise to help you with very specific strategic opportunities. And then, and I'll let Dan talk about this a little bit more, the open source software PSE, or partner sales executive, for the global black belt team. Just talk a little bit, I think, which you already did, but just a review.
So just as you think about the roles that are here to support you, from the what looks like yellow and red roles are in our global black belt team. That's the organization that I'm in. Our focus there is to really help you address large-scale market opportunities, working on sizable first customer scenarios, integration with our field sellers, and then using our dozen or so technical architects to really help unblock or accelerate opportunities. It's all about driving the flywheel of sales and your success and your billable rates on top of Azure. The next slide really drives a little bit deeper on the co-sell side. So Tim will spend some time talking about what it takes to become a partner and build a practice on Azure with open source capability. This is really about the things that we do together to help with co-selling and pipeline generation. So as you look from left to right on this chart, this is the areas that we focus on driving leads and driving top of the funnel capabilities to our partners, the lead sharing, partners bringing in leads, Microsoft bringing in leads, and us having really ongoing pipeline conversations about where the market is going and where is it at today. We do quite a bit of field education inside the Microsoft channel around partner capabilities, around partner offers, how to find a partner in your local geography that you can go co-sell with. We talk about new workloads. What are we bringing to market that you can very quickly be able to slipstream into or be able to build a practice on to become a market expert, such as the SQL on Linux we're going to talk about later today. So about identifying these new workloads and then really connecting and bringing our partners into the broader Microsoft ecosystem. As you look at our engage, try, and adopt phases, this is about us really engaging closely with your business and technical folks, driving opportunities and real accounts that drive real revenue on your behalf. Then what we do is we try to create a repeatable process here and engage you and connect you to our field sellers and to our district and segment leadership so that you can become a trusted go-to partner as more and more of these workloads really come up. At the end, as you look at when we go through the actual deployment stage, and now we're on the depend stage, we really want to provide feedback back to our engineering organizations and our worldwide sales organizations about what works, what do we need to tweak or tune to drive more pipeline, to drive more velocity, to drive more joint execution. We also talk about, programs and efforts to keep you engaged at customers, such as Digital Partner of Record. This is an incentive program Tim will talk about later that allows our partners to monetize and continually monetize deployments on our public cloud. But then also it's about connecting our ISV ecosystem partners with SIs and making sure that there's a mutually beneficial relationship there to drive consumption on a public cloud. So if I was to sum this conversation up, my team and everybody that is in the Global Black Belt organization is about creating customer evidence and customer success through partners in the open source space.
Yeah, so, and again, it's just we're just identifying another commitment to this open source opportunity that you have. Here's a very quick slide, and I won't go through everything, but I want you to be aware you have the slides and you can download them. There are quite a lot of partner offers out there that can help you drive opportunity. And the way I think about these offers are, think of helping you reduce the cost of sales, right? So we have funding that allows you to drive consumption. We have funds that allow you to drive pipeline, and then we have funds that allow you to drive the adoption. All of these are marketing funding that gives you money to go out and work with a customer to get something going. The thing that I would give you the advice on this, especially for the technical architects that are joining this call, think of these funding as a vital building blocks for what your assessment or kickstart offers are. Remember, Microsoft and their selling team, they're aware of these offers, and what they want as a great partner is a partner whose offers can be kickstarted through these programs. If you engage and you integrate this funding into your offers, it just means that it's a friction-free sales cycle for the sellers. So what I would point out here is be aware of them and see how you can integrate that into your offering. One of the ones that we're going to focus on right now is what we call Azure Everywhere. It's probably funding that you've already heard about, but specifically this year we're calling out open source because it's such a critical workload for Microsoft and for partners. So with that, I'm going to click onto the next slide and let Dan talk about Azure Everywhere and what that means and how you can leverage it.
Our goals with Azure Everywhere are really to try to get our open source certified partners in front of customers to have conversations around how they can adopt public cloud and move from planning stage to try to deploy stage as soon as possible. So we look at it as a great way for partners to get really great qualified leads. The motion typically is, as we've run it here now for about a month and a half to 2 months, we will get a lead. Partners can make this as part of their offers, or we can have our Microsoft field sellers make this offer to the customers. And the request is for a 3 to 4 day workshop where we cover a little bit of education, but then we also get into hands-on deployment mechanisms. The workshop itself, we've got a set of modules that Tim and I have really helped curate and are now in the process of open sourcing. But these modules are really kind of optional. Think of them like a pick list that you can pull from to build a custom experience for your customer. And we can be very flexible in what's delivered as long as it basically is education and then deployment on Azure. The whole goal of this is to get you in a position where you're going to be able to make a proposal to the customer for a longer statement of work, for an ongoing statement of work. So it's really around lead qualification and Microsoft supporting and funding the first 4 days of this engagement so that we can show value early and really get to a great opportunity for us to work together at the customer space. So on that, in that vein, in that effort, we have Azure everywhere, and it's called Fast Start for Linux Fundamentals. And the idea here is, how can we go out and talk to customers about, let's say, either moving their infrastructure up to the public cloud, or creating a hybrid environment, or even optionally redoing their development space and pipeline to leverage newer technologies such as Docker, for example, or provisioning technologies as we've seen happen. We see a pretty significant uptake on this. So we see a lot of customers that are very interested in this workshop and this idea of being able to get a partner out there. How I would coach the people on the phone to think about this offering is it's a way to generate great qualified pipeline. It's not a practice in itself. It's not a profit center so much as it is a cost recovery scenario for you, and one that is fully funded from Microsoft through our partner incentive programs. So we're looking actively for partners that would like to deliver this type of workshop across those 6 high-value workloads we talked about earlier. To just dive in a little bit more, we have created Microsoft field education material across each one of those 6 workloads with customer qualification questions and typical workload deployment models, and we would like to tie into that partners that can come in on each one of those workloads, deliver these workshops, and then also engage in longer-term consulting opportunities within those accounts.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect point. So the call out to the partners is, we need partners to be able to deliver this Azure Fast Start for Linux fundamentals. So if you're on the call or you're listening to the recording, you have our email addresses right at the beginning of the presentation. We really want you to look at it, reach out to us so we can get you engaged. There is incredible demand from the Microsoft sales force for us to be able to deliver this at customers. So please let us know if you're going to get engaged with this Azure Fast Start funding, and let us know, and then we can get you integrated and make sure that the field sales is aware of what your partner can deliver. So with that, I'm going to sort of finish up with a call to action, right? We want you to engage with this OSS community. We want you to communicate to us what the next workloads are that we should look at, what technical training that you need. We want you to become cloud certified. We want you to build this open source solution offering for our customers. And this is key for us, right? This is where we're looking to the partners for you to build it. I'll give some great examples. I'm currently onboarding 3 partners. One is doing DevOps. Believe it or not, most of their DevOps solution is built on open source technologies and driving that value pipeline. So we're working with them to develop that practice. And that's driving a lot of infrastructure and consumption, which that partner is seeing very great opportunity. The other one is I'm working with a partner on data platform, right? Their solution is all built on Apache Spark and open source technology. Customers that are driving for a big data solution need that expertise, and they're looking for trusted advisors that know the open source world. So those are the type of solutions that we're looking for. So build that OSS offering and then engage the partner enablement. I and my team and resources can work with you to build that and make sure that is known through this engage with Microsoft Sell With to the field, to the Microsoft field. So with that, I want that to be the call of action. Hopefully we've done a good job of giving you an overview of open source, what the opportunity is, and for your feedback on if you're going to be engaged with this community, what solutions and what training should we be looking at future dates. So with that, I'm going to transition now to Travis, who's going to do an overview of what I think is a huge opportunity for partners, run that ability for us to take SQL and run it anywhere, specifically on open source. So when you think about any open source stack, the demand for developers to be able to run SQL on Linux, I think, is incredible. But with that, I'll hand it over to Travis Wright, and he can walk you through what that opportunity is, what our vision is for SQL on Linux. But with that, I'll hand over to you. Thanks, Travis.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Glad to be here today. I'll be talking a little bit about SQL Server on Linux, just giving you an overview of what's coming. And definitely please reach out to me. I'm very interested in teaming up with any partners. Actually, one of my main responsibilities here on the engineering team is the engineering level of our engagement with our partners in this ecosystem around SQL Server. And that really has kind of two facets to it. One is taking the existing, really huge partner ecosystem around SQL Server and having those partners expand their offerings to also support SQL Server on Linux, as well as finding new partners that we can partner with, because SQL Server is now coming to Linux, and that opens up a lot of additional new possibilities. So with that, let's just begin with a quick demo. I'll show you a couple demos of SQL Server on Linux. Hopefully this will be kind of interesting for you to see. The first demo I'll do is of SQL Server running on a Docker container. So what I have here in my development environment on my MacBook is a Docker Compose environment that's made up of 5 different containers that comprise a voting application. It's a simple application. The first container is the voting app, which is a web-based application where somebody can go and vote on cats versus dogs, which one is better. And that is an application that writes the result that the person voted into a Redis cache DB. And then there's which you see down here in this container. And then there's a result app, which is a node-based application that runs in another container, and that connects to SQL Server. And then we have behind the scenes there a worker application, which is written in .NET, and that copies the vote from the Redis cache DB to the SQL Server DB. So somebody goes to the voting app, they vote, that gets written into the Redis cache DB, the worker copies the vote from the Redis cache DB into SQL Server, and then the result app shows that resulting vote. So with that, let's just bring up the environment here. So we'll do Docker Compose up, and this will bring up all of the containers here at once. Okay, so we see the Redis container coming up. This is the output from the SQL Server container coming up. And we can see now the last output there was SQL Server is now ready for client connections. It's created the votes database, and now we have the process running in the background. Now we can actually see the application running here by looking at the voting application where somebody can vote. And then over here, we have the results app, which stands at 50% for each because nobody's voted yet. So let's go ahead and vote. I'll vote for dogs since I have a dog and not a cat. And we can see that the update is shown here on the results site. So this is a simple application that just shows a couple different things. One is SQL Server running on Linux in a Docker container, and it shows the application, in this case, writing the data into the Redis cache DB here, which you can see, and then the .NET application creating the votes database if it doesn't exist right here, and then it inserts the table into the database if it's needed, and then we have a merge statement here which inserts the vote into the database. So this shows .NET Core running ASP.NET Core in a Linux container on Docker, connected to SQL Server on Linux in a Docker container. And then we have, in this example, a node application, which is using the tedious driver to connect to SQL Server. And this kind of shows how open source technologies like the tedious driver and node can work seamlessly with SQL Server running on Linux in Docker. The other example I'll show you is of installing SQL Server in a RHEL virtual machine. So I have just a RHEL 7.2 virtual machine running here, and I'm just going to do a yum install MS SQL Server. And this will pull the RPM package down from our repo that we have for the private preview that we have going right now. This will pull down the RPM package, and we'll go through the installation experience. We also have packages available for installing on Ubuntu. and we're now also working on a SUSE package as well. So you can see that the installation download size is fairly small relative to what you might see with SQL Server on Windows. It's only 350 megs or so. And we can actually download and install SQL Server and get going in, depending on your network speed, about 40-45 seconds, which is great. This is just a nice seamless experience that people would expect on a Linux environment using a package installer to do that. Okay, so now we have SQL Server up and running. And before we can begin using SQL Server, the convention on RHEL is to configure and then start the service. So we'll do a cd over to opt SQL bin. And you can see that we have some different files in here. And we'll run the SQL Server setup program here. And this will allow us to accept the license agreement and provide a SA password. So once we do that, it will configure SQL Server, and then we'll start the service. Okay, so now we just systemctl start MS SQL Server, and now we can just see that the service is actually running. So there's the MS SQL Server service that's running, and now we'll simply use SQL CMD to connect to the environment, and we can run some queries now. Okay, so there's SQL Server running on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We can do some basic things like create database, OSS FTW, let's say. Okay, now if we do select name from sys databases, we can see that we now have this OSS FTW database. So this is just kind of a quick example of the experience that people get installing in Linux. The point of this really is just to show how quickly it is to acquire and install and configure a SQL Server on Red Hat, and how it shows that everything is just native as you might expect it to be in a Linux environment. It's not anything weird. Trying to map to the conventions that you would find in Linux and open source environments, and just do what people would expect, nothing weird. All right, so hopefully VirtualBox will give me my mouse back here. Sometimes it's a little finicky. So as we go along, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the question panel there, and I'll periodically ask if there's any questions and try to answer those.
Travis, we did have one question come in if you want to take that now.
Sure.
So it looked like you did not give an instance name when installing SQL on the Linux box there. Is there going to be an option to have more than one instance of SQL Server?
Right. So our current thinking, if people want to do multiple instances, would be to use Docker containers to do that. So you actually just set up multiple containers and then just have each of those listening on a different port. And so far, people seem to be pretty keen on that approach. If anybody has any feedback on that, though, I'm happy to hear it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and folks, just a reminder, if you have any questions down in the lower left-hand part of your browser, you can type them in there. So, Travis, back to you.
Okay, thanks. I'm just trying to get my mouse cursor back here so I can go back into the presentation.
Travis, this is Tim. Just a quick question.
Go ahead.
So, you know, obviously you've shown the SQL. I mean, once that's up and running, though, can I connect with things like Visual Studio, etc., as if it's just another instance of SQL Server?
Yes, absolutely. So the nice thing about the approach that we've taken here, that I'll get into it in a minute here, is that all of the existing tools that we have that run on Windows today, like SQL Server Management Studio, SQL Server Data Tools in Visual Studio, lots of third-party database administration tools like Eclipse or JetBrains DataGrip or dbeaver, any of those things, if you connect them to SQL Server on Linux, they behave just like they do with SQL Server on Windows. There's a few things that need to be tweaked in the SQL Server Management Studio and SQL Server Data Tools. We're working on that now, so that maybe some things don't show up if they're not implemented yet on SQL Server on Linux, for example. But for the most part, all those tools should just work. Using command line utilities like SQL CMD, BCP, SQL Package, and lots of third-party and OSS tools like SQL CLI, which is a node-based SQL command line utility. All of those things work just great with SQL Server on Linux. So it's very seamless there. And then we're bringing some additional very interesting things to the market, I think, that will be interesting for people to see. One of those things will be a extension to Visual Studio Code. And then we've got some other stuff coming up as well that we'll announce a little bit later. But the idea is just to have, maximum compatibility between SQL Server on Linux and SQL Server on Windows. And we've had lots of customers trying out their applications that they've historically had running on SQL Server on Windows, and we asked them to stand up a test database on SQL Server on Linux, and then just simply change their connection string, and people report back that their test suites are running with 100% compatibility. So that's a great story. The only case where things maybe need to be tweaked is when people are doing some things around the application which might be specific to the Windows environment. Like, for example, if they're making WMI calls into SQL Server, into the Windows host that's hosting SQL Server, or doing some things like that. But for the most part, there's just a really good compatibility there.
Travis, what about things like integration services? Would that work?
Yeah, so I'll get into the scope of the release here in 1 minute. We'll talk about integration services and some of the other pieces of SQL Server.
Awesome. Thanks, Travis.
Sure. So I'll answer a couple of the top-level questions that we most often get. The first is, why is Microsoft doing this? And it really just comes down to giving our customers, partners, and developers flexibility. And, if you kind of think about some of the trends in the industry right now, Linux is a growing presence in the enterprises and the cloud, and we want to make sure that SQL Server is an option there for customers or partners that want to be using Linux. And so that's just an obvious thing of just getting in front of the growing opportunity around Linux. The second is that Docker is becoming a very popular deployment option, especially in development and test environments, but increasingly also in production as well. And Docker historically has been a Linux-based solution, and so we want to make sure that Docker is an option for customers that want to be using SQL Server. And we've recently also, as you know, launched Windows Server 2016 with support for Docker containers, and we also have support for running SQL Server in Windows-based Docker containers. And then lastly is that we watch the Stack Overflow developer survey that happens every year, and what we're seeing is that there's a trend of developers increasingly using OS X and Linux as their dev client OS. That stands right now at about 50% of the developers are using Windows, and 25% or so are using OS X, and 25% using Linux. And in our research that we did leading up to the decision to bring SQL Server to Linux, we interviewed a lot of customers and developers, and we found that about 70% of the developers or so that we interviewed preferred to have a local database for their development environment, as opposed to using a shared database in the cloud or some test infrastructure. And so we want to make sure that SQL Server is an option for developers that prefer to be using OS X or Linux as their development environment. And so that's a big reason why we've done SQL Server on Linux, is to make sure that developers have that choice as well. And if you think about it, this really just maps to Microsoft's new mission statement, which is to empower every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more. And it's about empowering everybody, and not just those people that choose to use Windows Server as their server, right? So this is about giving everybody the opportunity to use the power of SQL Server to really do amazing things with data. The next common question we get is, how did we do this? And really this just comes down to doing what a lot of other database vendors do, which is to create a platform abstraction layer, or a PAL. What we did is we took the SQL OS layer that exists in SQL Server today, which is responsible for a lot of the memory management and processor scheduling and network and disk I/O. A lot of that stuff is actually done by SQL Server itself today in this SOS layer. So we don't really rely on Windows to do a lot of those things anyway. And so we've just expanded the SQL OS layer into this new SQL platform abstraction layer. And what that basically allows is SQL to server to run mostly unchanged on top of this SQL platform abstraction layer, and then underneath the covers we have host extensions for the different operating systems we support. And so we have a Windows host extension now, we have a Linux host extension, and that's really just there to map the application binary interface calls from SQL Server into the right APIs depending on the host that we're running on. And so, really the question comes up about whether or not that's going to impact performance. And so what we've done is we've made sure that any performance critical code paths go more directly through this SQL PAL layer and into the application binary interfaces. For things that are not performance critical, those will continue to exist and sit on top of the Win32 APIs, but be mapped through the SQL OS layer into the right application binary interface call underneath the covers. So that's kind of how we've done it. The good thing about this is that it basically just means that SQL Server, as we know it today, with its high quality, high performance, high security, remains mostly unchanged. And so that enables us to quickly bring this to market and provide that great stability that SQL Server is known for, and good performance and security as well. Okay, and then going forward, because everything is built on top of the SQL platform abstraction layer, as we add new features or capabilities to SQL Server, those will show up on Windows and on Linux as we go forward. Okay, and then let's kind of switch now to talk about the roadmap of SQL Server on Linux. So we made the announcement back in March of 2016. We started a private preview program at that time. We've been onboarding customers throughout these last few months as quickly as we could. We had, I think we're up to about 22,000 people sign up for the private preview. And we've been able to onboard about 1,500 of those. And that represents over 600 companies that are participating in the private preview at this time. And we've been releasing monthly releases to those customers to try out SQL Server on Linux, provide us feedback. I think we've done 6 releases to date. We have another one going out this week. And here pretty soon we'll be getting into a public preview. And we're trying to find customers that are willing to go into production using SQL Server on Linux with full support from Microsoft support as well as our engineering team. And then we've announced that our target for general availability is the middle of calendar year 2017. So to cover the feature scope, the focus for the mid-2017 release is the relational database system. We have the package-based installation experience, which we saw in the demo at first. We will have support for Ubuntu and RHEL for sure. CentOS is TBD. We likely will add SUSE as well. As I mentioned, we're working on that now. We have Docker container support, which we saw. And these are all available from Microsoft repos currently as part of the private preview, but we will be publishing the Docker images to Docker Hub or Docker Store, depending on the timing there. We'll have availability groups as well, so that'll provide support for high availability, both the failover clustering variety with a shared disk, as well as a replication-based always-on availability groups for high availability. The security features that we have recently added to SQL Server will all be available on SQL Server on Linux, so this includes things like transparent data encryption, always encrypted, row-level security, auditing, and data masking. We have support for SQL logins today and are in process right now of adding support for Active Directory authentication. We have a cross-platform database admin GUI tool that we're working on that I mentioned earlier. We also have support already in the product today for all the in-memory and column store-based features. JSON and XML are working today. In fact, the demo that I showed you, I didn't really point it out, but it actually uses the 4JSON capabilities in SQL. We will have support for CLR. So this is executing .NET code in the context of SQL Server store procedures and queries. And then we're working now on the SQL Server agent and replication. And there's a lot of other features that will also be available, but it really just becomes too long of a list. I just kind of put the highlights of what will be available in the mid-2017 timeframe. Things that are not in scope for mid-2017 include integration services, analysis services, reporting services, and some of these other features that you see here. We are working already on integration services, so we plan to bring that to SQL Server on Linux. The other items will be brought to Linux based on customer demand for those things to be present on Linux. And the other thing that people kind of ask about is, well, can I run some of these services on Windows and connect to SQL Server on Linux? And yes, that's certainly a scenario that we intend to support. We just need to do some testing on that, make sure that things are looking good. But you know, we want SQL Server on Linux to be a source and a destination for data migration, for integration services, and so on. And we will also have support in the SQL Server Migration Assistant and in the Data Migration Assistant for SQL Server on Linux to be a source or a target for moving data between and migrating database applications from Oracle or MySQL to SQL Server on Linux, as well as upgrading from other editions of SQL Server to SQL Server on Linux. For the most part, you should just be able to take your database that exists on SQL Server on Windows today and just backup restore it, or attach detach the database, or use SQL package to create a backup or backpack or DACPack file, and then import that into SQL Server on Linux. So the binary level compatibility between the SQL Server on Windows and SQL Server on Linux makes it easy to move databases from one direction or to the other, or vice versa. There's good application portability there between the SQL Server running on Linux versus Windows. So hopefully that just gives you a quick overview of SQL Server on Linux. We'll take maybe a couple questions here at the end before we wrap up. Here's my contact information. If any of you are interested in being a part of the SQL Server on Linux private preview, please contact me directly at my email address there. You can get more information at sqlserveronlinux.com and sign up for the private preview. But you'll probably get accepted into the private preview program more quickly if you just contact me directly. As I mentioned at the top of the call, I'm the lead program manager responsible for our partner relationships. So I'm very interested in finding new partners for us to work with when we bring SQL Server on Linux to market. And we see this as a huge opportunity for Microsoft as well as all of our partners. So let's definitely connect up and see what we can do to help each other. So do we have any quick questions we can take before we wrap up the call?
Yeah, there was one that came in. Any plans to have SQL on Linux as one of the sort of standard cataloged offerings right in the Azure VM catalog?
Yeah, great question. So we will have SQL Server on Linux available as a VM template in Azure at the time that we hit public preview, and of course beyond that. And we're also working with other hosting providers to make sure that SQL Server on Linux is an option in other places as well.
So then the follow-on question to that is, any plans to have SQL Server on Linux as the PaaS offering in Azure?
Right. So today, the Azure SQL Database PaaS service is built on SQL Server on Windows. We don't have any plans to change that at this point in time. A lot of infrastructure and kind of operational mechanics that we have to operate that service right now are centered around Windows. So there's no plan to change that at this time.
Okay, great. That's all the questions we have. So we're actually at a good point to wrap up the call. So, Tim, I know you're kind of our lead here in the community. Any closing thoughts for us today?
No, I think the call went well, and Travis, I really want to appreciate you getting on, and that was an awesome demo and overview of SQL on Linux. So thank you very much. I just want to thank everybody that's joined. I appreciate joining, and remember, you've got our contact information. Please reach out to us if you're interested in building an open source practice.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and close out today's call. The recording will be posted on our Yammer group here within the next day or so as soon as that's available. The slide deck can be found there today. And if you have any questions or feedback, please post them on that Yammer group. We're actively monitoring that, and we really do want to hear from you. So thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.